too much noise today. I just need the road, the rain, and the hum of the engine.
Have you ever had that moment when you feel like you're doing everything right, yet it still falls apart? You're present, attentive, kind. You give your heart in little ways, not asking for much in return. But somehow he just fades, stops reaching out, becomes distant, like you were never as meaningful as you thought. I've been there too, and it can shake something deep inside. Not just your confidence in relationships, but your sense of worth. I remember once being in a situation like that. I thought we had something special. We laughed at the same dumb jokes, shared stories late into the night, and even had that quiet comfort in silence, the kind that feels safe. And then, out of nowhere, he started pulling away. Fewer messages, colder responses, less light in his voice. I started questioning everything. Was I too much? Too available? Not enough of something? What I didn't realize back then was that I was trapped in a pattern I couldn't see. A belief that if I gave more, proved more, made myself easier to love, then love would stay. But love doesn't work that way. Not the kind that stays. Not the kind that roots itself in your soul. There's this illusion a lot of us fall into, especially when we're trying to show someone how much they matter. We think if we just love harder, show more effort, be the one who never gives up, then surely they'll see our value. And maybe they do. For a moment. But value isn't something you prove. It's something you embody. And here's the kicker. The moment you start trying to prove it, you've already stepped away from it. It took me time to realize that men, just like women, are not drawn to effort alone. They're drawn to energy, to presence, to the invisible dance of tension, silence, and mystery. Not the kind of mystery that plays games or hides truth, but the kind that comes from knowing who you are and not being afraid to hold space for it. It's not about saying the right things or always being there at the perfect moment. It's about being grounded in yourself, so deeply that your presence speaks louder than your words ever could. That's when I started to understand something deeper, something I wish I had known earlier. Desire doesn't thrive in the obvious. It doesn't grow where everything is explained and laid out, neat and tidy. It grows in the places where there's room to wonder, to question, to feel something unnameable. When someone feels that being around you is not just enjoyable, but awakening, like something in them comes alive they didn't know was asleep. Have you ever met someone who wasn't the most beautiful or the funniest or even the most charming, but for some reason you just couldn't stop thinking about them? Like they planted a question in your soul that you didn't know how to answer. That's the kind of presence we're talking about. It's not loud. It's not performative. It's quietly powerful. It leaves an imprint. And here's where it gets uncomfortable. Many of us have been taught the opposite. We've been taught to show our value by being endlessly kind, responsive, always available. But in doing that, we sometimes erase the very thing that makes us magnetic, our boundaries, our individuality, our stillness. We become predictable, and not because we're boring, but because we stop leaving space for mystery. It's not about withholding, it's about breathing. About letting someone come to you not because you're cold, but because you're warm in a way that doesn't rush, that doesn't cling, that doesn't need to be chosen to feel whole. I know how hard that is, especially when you really like someone, when you want to share your world with them. But the truth is, if you give them the whole map before they even ask for directions, there's nothing left to explore. And exploration is part of what keeps desire alive. I started shifting the way I showed up, not in a strategic way, not to manipulate anyone, but to honor myself. I stopped filling every silence. I let my messages breathe. I waited to feel a genuine urge to connect, rather than a need to be needed. And I reminded myself, I am not here to audition for love. I am here to live it, to be it, fully, quietly, powerfully. And you know what happened? Some people drifted away. The ones who needed me to shrink to feel safe. They disappeared. But others, the ones who could feel the depth behind my silence, they stayed. They leaned in. They saw something different, something real. If you've ever felt like your light was too dim to keep someone's attention, maybe the problem wasn't your light. Maybe it was that you were shining it in places that didn't deserve it. Or maybe you were trying so hard to shine, you forgot how to just be, how to let your quiet presence say everything. There's nothing wrong with wanting to be loved. There's nothing wrong with giving. But when your giving becomes a way to earn love rather than express it, that's when the fracture begins. That's when you start abandoning yourself in hopes that someone else will finally see you. But the ones who are meant to stay, they don't need you to shout. They hear you in the pause. They feel you in the quiet. They recognize the depth in your eyes before you even speak. And that's the kind of connection that doesn't vanish when things get real. That's the kind of love that sees you, not for what you do, but for who you are. And that's where it all begins. You know, there's something strange that happens when you stop chasing, not just people, but attention, validation, the urge to be seen all the time. At first it feels like a loss, like you're doing something wrong. We've been told for so long that connection requires constant presence, constant effort, that love is something to be maintained by showing up more, speaking more, proving more. But I've learned that sometimes the most powerful presence is in absence, not abandonment, but space. There was a time I believed that if I wasn't always available, always warm, always showing my care, then I'd be forgotten. That if I didn't respond right away, if I didn't match their energy with immediate enthusiasm, I'd lose them. And in some cases, I did. But what I discovered is that I wasn't really losing anyone. I was just making space for the people who actually wanted to meet me where I stood, not where I chased. Men, and people in general, often don't realize that what holds them is not someone's constant presence, but a sense of depth they can't quite grasp, something unspoken. A woman who doesn't just give herself away too easily, not because she's playing games, but because she's in tune with her own value. That kind of energy is unforgettable. There's a reason desire doesn't survive in predictability. Our minds crave meaning, exploration, something that stirs the soul beyond what is obvious. Emotional presence that lingers, even in silence. That's what creates obsession. When someone leaves a piece of themselves behind in the way they looked at you, or in the space they held without needing to fill it with noise. I used to be the girl who tried to be the one who understood, who anticipated needs, who answered texts before they were even fully typed. But what I didn't realize back then was that by constantly filling every moment with attention, I was suffocating the natural rhythm of connection. I wasn't giving anyone space to miss me, to wonder, to reflect. Now I allow room, not to manipulate, but to breathe. I don't rush to respond anymore. I don't try to solve the silence. I let it sit. I let the other person feel it, notice it, reach back if they want to, and if they don't, that silence becomes a mirror. It shows me everything I need to know. The paradox is that the less you try to be everything, the more magnetic you become, because suddenly you're not performing, you're just being. Fully, calmly, confidently, you become less of an option and more of a presence. And the right ones feel it, not just in their minds, but in their bodies, in their breath. You leave an emotional imprint they can't quite explain, and that mystery becomes a tether. You've probably met a woman like that before. Maybe not the loudest in the room, not the most traditionally attractive, but she had this energy, a stillness, a gravity. She wasn't trying to pull attention, but you couldn't stop looking. She made you wonder. That's the power of someone rooted in themselves. This isn't about being cold or distant. It's not about disappearing just to seem more valuable. It's about realizing that your worth doesn't increase the more you chase. It expands the more you hold space for yourself. The more you allow others to come to you, not from need, but from genuine connection. One of the most freeing shifts I made in my life was when I stopped asking, how can I make them stay? And started asking, how can I be fully myself, whether they stay or not? That single question changed everything. It took me from being reactive and anxious to centered and peaceful, because when you're no longer afraid of losing what isn't yours to control, you make space for what's truly aligned. And something wild happens when you move like that. People feel it, even if they can't explain it. They're drawn in, not because you did anything special, but because your silence carries meaning, your absence echoes, your presence, when it appears, feels like a gift, not a performance. This is what Carl Jung meant when he spoke about the unconscious. Real connection doesn't come from words or actions alone. It comes from energy, from symbols, from that intangible sense that there's something in you that can't be fully defined. And because it can't be defined, it stays. It lingers in the corners of someone's mind, long after you've left the room. If you've ever been told that you're too complex, too quiet, too hard to read, don't change that. That quiet mystery, when it's grounded in truth, is a form of power. It calls people in, not because you ask them to come closer, but because your soul whispers something they've never quite heard before. You don't need to be loud to be unforgettable. You just need to be real, present, still. And that kind of presence, it haunts the ones who were never ready to meet it. There's something I want to share with you. Something I learned the hard way. Sometimes without even realizing it, we start giving ourselves away piece by piece. Not because we're weak, not because we're desperate, but because somewhere deep inside, we carry this quiet fear that we're not enough as we are. So we overgive, we over-explain, we try to be perfect, the woman who's always available, always kind, always adjusting. And while the intention comes from a place of love, the effect is that we begin to abandon ourselves. I didn't notice when I started doing it. At first, it felt like love. Showing up, making time, being there, canceling plans, responding quickly, always making space. But over time, I began to feel hollow, like I was being everything for someone else, but forgetting who I was in the process. And the painful part, he didn't even ask for that version of me. He just accepted what I gave, and then slowly pulled away. That's when I started learning about shadow, the parts of us we disown, hide, or repress. Carl Jung talked about it, how our unconscious drives so much of what we do. And for many women, that shadow shows up in the form of over-accommodation. It's the part of us that says, if I just make myself smaller, easier, nicer, maybe then I'll be loved. But love built on self-erasure is not love, it's survival. I remember a friend of mine, Valentina, stunning, smart, funny. She had this light about her, and men were always drawn to her at first, but it never lasted. The pattern was always the same: intense beginnings, sweet words, promises, and then, slowly, distance, silence. The story would end before it even began. One day, over coffee, she looked at me and said, "Is there something wrong with me?" And that question broke my heart, not because it was true, but because she believed it. But when I looked at her life, at how she always answered right away, cleared her schedule, prioritized everyone but herself, I saw it. Her actions were drenched in unspoken anxiety. She wasn't asking for love with words, but her energy was begging for it. And that energy, it pushes people away, not because she was unlovable, but because she was giving from a place of lack, not fullness. We often think that proving our worth will make someone stay, that if we just show them how devoted, how kind, how imperfect we can be, they'll finally choose us. But what if real love doesn't ask for proof? What if the right person doesn't need us to shrink, soften, or mold ourselves to their preferences? What if they just want us, raw, present, imperfect? When Valentina began to see this, she started changing, not drastically, not overnight. But little by little she stopped over-explaining. She stopped trying to anticipate what others wanted and started asking herself what she wanted. She slowed down. She became less available but more present. And something incredible happened. The same men who used to ghost her began pursuing her again. Not because she was playing games, but because she had become rooted in herself. She wasn't broadcasting need. She was embodying worth. It was like watching someone return to their own body, like she stopped performing and started living. And her energy shifted. She became the kind of woman you notice when she walks into a room, not because she demands it, but because she holds herself differently, quiet, grounded, whole. You see, when we constantly try to earn love, we send the message to others and to ourselves that we don't already have it within us. But when we slow down, when we stand in our truth without needing to justify it, we become magnetic, not flashy, not loud, just deeply, undeniably compelling. There's a difference between being chosen because you're convenient and being chosen because you're unforgettable. And that difference lies in how you hold your own space. If any of this resonates with you, if you've ever found yourself shrinking, chasing, bending over backwards just to feel wanted, I want you to know this. There's nothing wrong with your desire to connect. There's nothing wrong with your heart. But maybe it's time to stop offering it so quickly. Maybe it's time to let someone earn the right to see you. The real you, not the one you curate for approval. When you stop giving from emptiness and start giving from presence, everything changes. You stop feeling drained, you stop questioning your worth, and you begin to attract people who want to meet you in that same truth. Not because you chased them, but because you stood still, and they recognized something in you they didn't even know they were searching for. You ever notice how certain people stick in your mind, even though they didn't say much? Maybe it was a glance, a moment of stillness, a single line that felt like it came from somewhere deeper than speech. It wasn't about charm or strategy. It was presence, energy, and it left something open, a kind of quiet loop in your soul that never really closed. That's what I started learning about real connection. It's not about how much you say or how often you're around. It's about the impression you leave when you're not, the experience you create in silence, the unanswered questions you allow to breathe. We're so conditioned to think that love grows in constant reassurance, in availability, affirmation, consistency. And yes, those things are beautiful when they come from a grounded place. But desire, obsession, that's something else entirely. It doesn't come from answers. It comes from curiosity, from the ache of wanting to understand what can't be fully explained. I remember this guy I dated once. We had amazing conversations, deep, emotional, real. But over time, I noticed a shift. The more I tried to keep him close, sending thoughtful messages, always being available, letting him know I was here, the more he drifted, not cruelly, just a soft detachment, like the thread between us was slowly loosening. And then I did something different. I stopped trying to fill every space. I stopped feeding the connection with my need to keep it alive. Instead, I focused on myself. I left some questions unanswered, some thoughts unspoken. I let my messages arrive when I felt them, not when I feared his absence. And something shifted. He came closer. Not because I said the right thing, but because the silence made him lean in. That's when it hit me. People aren't drawn to what's fully given. They're drawn to what's revealed slowly, piece by piece. And in those pauses, those tiny emotional spaces, Their imagination begins to do the work. They start to wonder, what is it about her? And the more they wonder, the deeper they feel. Not about logic, about sensation, symbol, emotion. Carl Jung would call this the language of the unconscious, that subtle current underneath words. It's where real desire lives, and it's why you can say all the right things, do everything perfectly, and still lose someone's interest. Because the heart doesn't respond to formulas. It responds to emotional imprint, to mystery, to the sense that there's something more. A woman becomes unforgettable not by pleasing, but by being grounded, being whole, being just enough out of reach that someone wants to reach, and not because she's playing hard to get, but because she's simply not rushing to give herself away. There's something deeply feminine about that kind of stillness. It's not cold. It's not withholding. It's receptive. It allows space for connection to rise rather than be forced. And when you move like that, slow, sure, aware, you stop being just another person in the room. You become an experience. And no one forgets an experience. The more I embodied this, the more I started seeing it everywhere. Women who didn't chase attention but received it effortlessly, not because of looks or charm, but because they carried themselves with a kind of knowing. They weren't performing, they weren't trying to be liked. They were simply living in their own rhythm. And men, they noticed, even if they couldn't explain why. It's funny, isn't it? We spend so much time trying to be understood, to be chosen. But sometimes what draws someone to us is the sense that we haven't been fully understood yet, that there's more, that there's something about you that resists quick definition, and that resistance, that's where longing is born. So if you ever feel the urge to explain yourself fully, to give more just to keep someone's attention, pause, let that impulse pass. Instead of offering answers, offer a moment of presence, a little space, a breath between the lines. Watch what happens, because when you hold something back, not out of fear, but out of self-respect, you create space for connection to deepen, for curiosity to bloom, and for the right person to lean in, not because you asked, but because something in them needed to. You don't have to be louder to be heard. You don't have to be more to be wanted. You just have to be you, quiet, true, and beautifully unfinished. There's a kind of peace that comes when you stop chasing and start remembering who you are, not the version of you that's shaped to please, to impress, or to be enough for someone else, but the version that's full, steady, rooted, the one that doesn't need to prove anything, because she already knows her value, the one who gives, but never begs, who loves, but never abandons herself in the process. It took me years to understand this. For the longest time, I believed love was something to be earned. That if I could just say the right thing, show up in the right way, give just a little more, I'd finally feel secure. But all that giving from emptiness, all that performing, it didn't bring me closer to love. It pulled me further from myself. Then something shifted. A moment, a conversation, a silence that landed harder than words, and I realized I don't want to be someone's idea of perfect. I want to be fully, fiercely myself, not someone waiting to be chosen, but someone who chooses herself again and again. That's when everything began to change. The way I walked into a room, the way I held eye contact, the way I responded, not urgently, not anxiously, but with calm presence. I wasn't rushing to be understood anymore. I was simply allowing myself to be slow, clear, and undiluted. And people noticed, not because I was louder, but because I was centered, because there was a kind of ease in me, a softness that wasn't fragile, but powerful. Like I didn't need anything from them, but I was open to everything true. That's the thing. When you no longer need attention, you stop grasping. And when you stop grasping, your energy speaks louder than words. You stop trying to fill every gap, and instead, you become the space. And in that space, people breathe differently. They feel something. They lean in. Men, especially, respond to this in ways they can't always articulate. Because it's not about logic, it's about sensation. They don't fall for the woman who says the most flattering words or makes herself most available. They fall for the one who makes them feel something new, something they didn't expect, something they can't shake. And that something? It often starts in silence, in the way you pause before responding, in the way your gaze lingers just long enough to stir a question, in the way your presence makes someone slow down and wonder who you really are. You see, we live in a world that teaches us to be fast, to react quickly, to prove our interest, to stay constantly visible. But the soul doesn't operate in speed. It remembers moments, energy, presence. It remembers how you made someone feel, not just what you said. That's why the woman who speaks less but with depth is remembered more than the one who fills the air. Why the woman who doesn't rush to impress often leaves the deepest impression. It's not about withholding, it's about anchoring, about knowing that your worth isn't in how quickly you reply or how available you are, but in how deeply you belong to yourself. And yes, some people might walk away. They'll say you're too quiet, too slow, too mysterious. Let them go, because they're not ready to meet you where you are. But the ones who are ready, they'll notice, they'll feel it in their gut, and they won't just be intrigued, they'll be moved. There's a kind of magic in a woman who is still, who doesn't perform, who doesn't prove, who simply allows herself to exist with dignity, softness, and truth. She doesn't need to be loud to be heard. Her energy does the speaking, her presence holds the room. And her silence? It says more than 1,000 perfect lines ever could. So if you're tired of trying so hard, let this be your permission to stop, to breathe, to return to yourself. Because the woman who is at peace with who she is doesn't chase love. She invites it, quietly, powerfully. And that invitation, my friend, is impossible to ignore. There's a delicate shift that happens when you stop needing to be understood and start becoming a mystery worth discovering. Not a puzzle to manipulate, but a presence that invites curiosity. That's the space where real attraction lives. Not in what's obvious, not in what's handed over freely, but in the subtle tension of the unknown. The pause between the notes, the space between the words. I used to be afraid of that space. I'd fill it with stories, over-explanations, little reassurances. I'd try to convince someone I was worth loving by giving everything too soon. My thoughts, my time, my energy, and I did it with the best of intentions. But in doing that, I took away the one thing that makes someone feel drawn in, the freedom to explore, to wonder, to earn access to who I am. We don't talk about this enough, especially in a world that idolizes openness and transparency. But sometimes the most beautiful parts of us deserve to be revealed slowly. Not because we're hiding, but because they're sacred. Because not everyone is meant to walk straight into our depths. And that's okay. Think about it. When someone hands you a beautifully wrapped gift, part of the experience is in the unwrapping, the anticipation, the feeling of being chosen to see what's inside. And when it comes to love, that's what creates the magic. The feeling that you're discovering someone moment by moment, layer by layer. When everything is already laid bare, there's nothing left to pursue, nothing left to feel your way through. I started practicing restraint, not emotional coldness, but soulful pacing. I stopped explaining myself so quickly. I left a little room in conversations, a little space in my presence, and I began to notice how people responded. Some felt unsettled, unsure, but others, they leaned in, they became attentive, not out of strategy, but out of genuine emotional resonance. Because that space spoke to something deeper than words. That's the paradox, isn't it? We fear being misunderstood, so we explain. But the more we explain, the less room we leave for someone to feel us, to sit with the energy, to decide for themselves what it means. And when we leave no room for interpretation, we leave no room for intrigue. I think a lot of us confuse connection with explanation. But the truth is, someone who's truly aligned with you doesn't need everything spelled out. They'll feel your presence. They'll be drawn to the parts of you that are quiet but powerful. They'll want to come closer, not because you're pushing, but because your stillness calls to something in them they don't quite understand. That's what real desire is. Not frantic, not transactional, but born from emotional ambiguity, the kind that lingers, the kind that makes someone think about you on a random Tuesday because something you said or didn't say stuck with them. That's not manipulation, that's resonance. And when a man feels that, really feels that, he starts to show up differently. He listens more closely. He watches more attentively, because now it's not about figuring out how to impress you. It's about discovering how he feels around you. That's the kind of emotional impact no amount of charm can manufacture. You don't need to be unpredictable to be compelling. You just need to stop filling in every blank. Stop anticipating every need. Let there be quiet moments. Let him wonder. Let him ask questions. Because when someone is left wondering, they begin searching. And that act of seeking, not for answers, but for meaning, is what opens the door to deeper intimacy. And I get it. It's scary to not explain yourself, to not immediately fill the silence. But silence isn't emptiness. It's presence. It's the space where your energy does the talking, and that energy, it's what he remembers long after the conversation is over. So the next time you're tempted to give everything too soon, your thoughts, your story, your time, ask yourself, am I doing this from fullness or from fear? Am I trusting my presence or trying to earn attention? Because your presence is enough. Your mystery is a gift. And the man who's right for you won't be threatened by it. He'll be captivated by it. Let him wonder. Let him work a little to understand what makes you glow. Let him feel that he's in the presence of someone rare. Not because you told him so, but because he can feel it. And when he does, when he looks at you not with curiosity alone, but with reverence, you'll know. You never had to chase love to be worthy of it. You only had to remember who you are when you're no longer trying to be understood. There's something I want you to really take in, something I had to learn not through books or advice, but through experience. When you stop giving from your fear and start giving from your fullness, everything changes. I used to give to avoid loss. I'd offer more of myself, my time, my emotions, just to keep someone close. I didn't realize it then, but that kind of giving wasn't rooted in love. It was rooted in anxiety. It was a quiet voice inside whispering, if you don't give enough, they'll leave. But the truth is, when you give from fear, what you actually offer is emptiness, and people can feel it, even if they don't consciously understand it. What I eventually discovered is that true presence doesn't come from proving anything. It comes from being at peace with yourself. That kind of presence is magnetic. You can't fake it, you can't package it. But when it's real, people respond. I began practicing a different kind of communication. I started breathing before I replied to a message. I asked myself, am I reacting or am I responding? I allowed myself to pause, to wait, to feel into what I actually wanted to say, instead of rushing to keep the conversation alive. And the craziest thing? The connection didn't die in those moments of silence. It deepened, because what I gave wasn't a performance. It was presence. And presence doesn't demand attention. It commands respect. Men, people feel the difference between urgency and calm, between grasping and knowing, between need and worth. They might not be able to articulate it, but emotionally, they know. That's why a woman who can sit in her own stillness without needing to fill the air is unforgettable. Not because she's trying to be mysterious, but because her energy is undisturbed. She's rooted. She's enough. And when you communicate from that place, with slow, intentional words and deep, open silence, you stop being just another voice in the noise. You become an experience, one that lingers. There's a kind of rhythm to this, a different tempo of relating that's not rushed or anxious. It's a quiet confidence, a natural flow. When you stop over-explaining, when you let your words land and breathe, you create emotional tension. The good kind, the kind that builds depth. It's in the way you speak, the way you pause, the way you let your eyes say more than your mouth ever could. Think of the people who've left an imprint on your life. It wasn't because they filled every space with chatter. It was because of how they made you feel in the spaces between their words. That's the magic. That's what lasts. I want you to know you don't have to try so hard. You don't have to be perfect or say the right thing or answer every message within seconds. You don't have to constantly remind someone that you're interested. Your presence, when it's honest, grounded, and real, is more than enough. But you have to feel that for yourself first, because if you're still trying to earn someone's love by over-performing, over-giving, or over-speaking, it's a sign you're not fully connected to your own value yet. And that's okay. It's something you practice. You learn to breathe before you reply, to smile without explanation, to trust the power of your stillness. Start small. Let your words come from a place of alignment, not anxiety. Don't rush to fill the silence. Let it speak. And remember, the more comfortable you are with your own pauses, the more someone will lean in to hear what you're truly saying, not just with your voice, but with your energy. You are not here to entertain. You are not here to convince anyone of your worth. You are here to live deeply, truthfully, freely. And when you start showing up like that, the right people will feel it. Not because you told them, but because you became someone they couldn't ignore. Let me say this plainly. You don't have to be loud to be powerful. You don't need to shout to be heard. The most unforgettable women I've ever known didn't fight for attention. They held it, quietly, steadily, not through performance, but through presence. There's a strength in a woman who doesn't rush, who doesn't explain her every move or shrink herself to fit into someone else's story. There's something magnetic about her because her energy doesn't say, choose me. It says, I've already chosen myself. And that shift, that simple, grounded knowing, changes everything. I want you to imagine a moment. You're sitting across from someone who intrigues you. Maybe you're a little nervous. Maybe your mind starts racing, wondering what to say next, how to be interesting, how to keep the connection alive. But what if, instead of reaching for the perfect thing to say, you just paused, took a breath, smiled, let the silence do its work? In that space, something happens. He notices your calm. He feels your ease. He sees that you're not scrambling for validation. You're resting in truth, and that does something to people. It disarms them. It invites them to meet you on that same level of presence. We're so often told to make an impression, but the truth is, the impressions that last aren't made by force. They're felt deeply, and they usually come in the most unexpected ways. The way your voice softens when you speak your truth, the way you don't rush to fill silence, the way you smile with your whole soul instead of just your face. I've come to believe that what makes someone unforgettable is not what they say. It's what they awaken in you. And when you move through the world with presence, when you're not chasing love but embodying it, people begin to feel differently around you, more alive, more curious, more connected. And that's the point. You don't need to be impressive. You just need to be real. But here's the catch. Being real means letting go of the masks, the habits of performing, the impulse to prove. It means trusting that your essence, your silence, your rhythm, your pauses is more than enough. Because it is. I remember once hearing that true desire doesn't come from certainty. It comes from the unknown, from that sense of, there's more to her and I want to understand it. That's what lingers in someone's mind. That's what brings them back. You don't have to reveal everything. You don't need to hand over your soul on the first night or the second or ever, unless it's earned. You're allowed to move slowly, to take your time, to let someone wonder about you, not as a game, not to manipulate, but because you are a whole world, and no one discovers a world all at once. The most powerful women I know aren't the ones who give it all away. They're the ones who offer just enough for you to feel their depth. And then they pause. They let you come closer, if you're ready, if you're willing, if you can meet them where they are. That's the kind of presence that creates devotion, not just attraction. So if you've ever felt like you need to do more, speak more, prove more just to be remembered, please hear me when I say, it's not true. What makes you unforgettable isn't how loudly you declare your worth. It's how quietly you embody it. And when you start living like that, when you stop chasing, stop explaining, stop trying to be the version of you think will be loved, something amazing happens. You become love, not a role you play, not a thing you give away, but a space you live in. And the people who are meant for you, they won't just notice, they'll feel it. And they won't want to let it go. You made it this far. That means something, maybe more than you realize. Because what you've just walked through isn't advice. It's a remembering, a returning to a part of yourself you may have been talked out of, trained away from, a part that was always there, waiting quietly for you to notice her again. She's the version of you that doesn't beg for love, but breathes it, who doesn't rush to be chosen, because she's already chosen herself, who doesn't lose sleep over silence because she knows her presence speaks louder than words ever could. And now, she's waking up. You might feel a little different, not in a way you can fully explain, but in the way your shoulders feel a bit lighter, in how you hold eye contact longer without flinching, in how you pause before responding, not because you're unsure, but because you're sure you don't need to rush anymore. There's real strength in that kind of stillness. And it's not just about relationships. It's about how you meet the world, how you sit with yourself, how you walk through rooms, how you stop performing and start living, how you let go of the version of you that was always hustling to be liked and start honoring the version that simply is. The journey back to her isn't always clean. Sometimes you'll slip into old patterns, texting first just to feel safe, talking too much just to fill a gap, giving too much because it feels like the only way to matter. That's okay, really. Be gentle with yourself. This isn't about perfection, it's about awareness, reconnection, reclaiming your rhythm. You'll know you're shifting when you stop needing answers and start allowing space. When someone's silence no longer threatens you but reveals them. When you stop wondering if you're too much or not enough, and instead start wondering, do they have the depth to meet me where I am? You'll start to notice how different it feels when someone reaches for you, not because you chased them, but because something in your energy touched something in theirs. That's not strategy, that's alignment. And if you've ever wondered why he still thinks about that woman, the one who wasn't the most beautiful, the most talkative, the most available, maybe now you know. She left an emotional fingerprint, not by trying, but by being. She gave him an experience, not just attention. She let her energy speak. That's who you are too. When you stop trying to say everything and start allowing yourself to feel everything, people notice. When you give less of your need and more of your essence, you become unforgettable. So if there's one thing I can leave you with, it's this. Your value doesn't live in how hard you try. It lives in how honestly you show up. You don't have to fight for your place in someone's heart. You don't have to explain your way into being seen. All you have to do is return again and again to the version of you that already knows. She is enough. She is home, and the right person. They won't just love her. They'll feel honored to meet her. So take a breath. Let go of the noise. Lean into the silence, into your own energy, into your calm. That's where everything begins. Again, I'm proud of you. Maybe no one's said that to you in a while. Or maybe you've heard it, but never really felt it sink in. But I want you to know, I see the quiet courage it takes to grow like this, to unlearn the noise, the striving, the self-erasure, to come home to yourself. This isn't just a shift in how you speak or how you love. It's a shift in how you exist. You've stopped asking, so how do I get them to love me? And started asking, how do I love myself enough that I no longer chase love that doesn't feel whole? That's not small. That's life-altering. And now you're probably wondering, okay, I get it, but how do I live this? How do I carry this into the real world, where people expect instant replies and constant availability, where everything feels rushed? The answer is simple, but not always easy. You practice. You breathe before you respond. That's the first thing. Not for effect, for truth. Give yourself that moment of pause to check in. Am I speaking from fullness or from fear? Am I rushing because I'm afraid to lose, or moving from a place of grounded love? Then you allow silence to exist. You resist the urge to fill every pause with words. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is nothing. A quiet smile, a soft look, a breath. Let your stillness do what frantic energy never could. Invite intimacy. Next, you slow your voice, not to seem mysterious, but because you're no longer in a hurry to be heard. Your tone becomes an offering, not a performance. When you speak from peace, people lean in. They feel something before they understand it. That's resonance. That's what sticks. You begin creating phrases that don't close the loop, they open it. Things like, there's something about you that feels familiar and I'm not even sure why. Or, you make me feel calm but also kind of exposed. Like you see more than I say. These aren't lines, they're mirrors, and they stir something deeper than compliments ever could. You stop being on all the time. You rest. You turn inward. You fill yourself up. Because nothing kills attraction faster than emotional emptiness disguised as enthusiasm. You aren't here to be consumed. You're here to be met. And above all, you remember, it's okay to be felt more than understood. Some parts of you aren't meant to be explained. They're meant to be experienced. And the right person won't just ask, who are you? They'll ask, can I stay a little longer to find out? That's what you've become. Not a story to skim, but a world to explore. So take this with you as you move forward. When you stay close to your own energy, when you trust your rhythm, when you stop chasing and start radiating, the right people will find you. Not because you sought them out, but because your truth made you impossible to ignore. And when they come, the ones who feel your silence, who see your stillness not as absence but as invitation, you'll know. This time, it's different. This time, it's real. Because this time, it started with you. That's it. That's the shift. Not a performance, not a technique, not a temporary high, a deeper way of being, a return to your own frequency. And if you're feeling something right now, that soft ache in your chest, the pull behind your eyes, the breath you didn't know you were holding, that's not an accident. That's truth landing. That's your body recognizing the parts of you that have waited a long time to be seen. I want to leave you with this. You are not here to become more palatable, more digestible, more convenient. You are here to be whole, not perfect, not polished. Whole. With your depth, your quiet, your intensity, your softness, your contradictions, all of it. because the most magnetic women are not the ones who work the hardest to be chosen. They are the ones who choose themselves first, who speak when they feel it, who are silent when they need to be, and who never, ever trade their essence for approval. And when you walk like that, when you move through the world with dignity and softness, with presence and poise, something sacred happens. You become a mirror. You stop being something to chase. You start being something to honor. And the man who is meant for you won't just want you. He'll recognize you, because he too has been searching for something real, something rare, something that doesn't beg or perform or apologize for existing. He's been looking for you, but more importantly, you've found you. And that is everything. That's the end of the story. But maybe it's the beginning of something even more important, not just a new way to show up in love, but a new way to show up in life. Because once you truly see yourself, once you feel the strength in your softness, the beauty in your restraint, the magnetism in your calm, there's no going back. You start moving differently. You speak less but say more. You let go faster. You choose better. You don't chase love anymore. You become it. And what you become, you attract. I don't know what your journey has looked like before now. Maybe you've given too much. Maybe you've felt invisible, replaceable, misunderstood. Maybe you've tried every version of yourself except the one that just is. But now you know. You don't need to do more to be loved. You need to be more you, the real you, the quiet, radiant, deep, honest you, the woman who isn't afraid to let silence speak, the one who trusts that the right person won't need convincing. He'll simply feel her. So let this story live in your bones. Let it change the way you breathe, the way you wait, the way you show up, not to perform, but to stand in your presence. Because when you walk into a room with that energy, no one forgets you. And the ones who are meant for you, they don't just stay, they rise to meet you.
If this felt meaningful to you, it might mean something to someone else too. So hit like, leave a comment, or subscribe. That's how YouTube knows to share with others. Maybe together, we can help someone see things a little differently.